Aye. Put your backs into it, lad. Heave ho. Thieves and beggars, never shall we die. Aye. 'Tis the greatest of ironies that you've ended up there with me this evening. You see, I've had my eye on you for quite some time now. And every time I think I've come to the point where you and I can cross paths, you seem to slip away. Not this time. Not this time at all, lad. This time, you're mine. Stole the queen from her bed and bound her in her bones. The seas be yours, and by the powers where we will roam. Into it, lads. Yo ho. All together. Hold the colours high. Heave ho. Thieves and beggars, never shall we die. Aye. I'm leaving early to go home. Ugh. And we're gonna be driving on the freeway. Oh no, big Cadillac. I just wanna go home. So I'm reading this fucking book, right? And it's like, there's this thing about reading web novels. So, it's called The Mech Touch. And early on, it's solid. To the point that one of the early chapters, and I don't remember which one it is, I want to see like late teens, early 20s, is seriously probably one of the best scenes I've come across in a web novel. Like, it is fucking legit. Like, all the feels, all the emotions, like, it's straight fucking crack to the emotional centers. Like, it's fantastic. However, 400 chapters in, he goes from writing a story which is about mech design and has some like trippy fucking spiritual context in terms of like the story and like how he's making his fucking what's it called, his X Factor requires like mentally, like it's. I enjoy the system. It's got some things about it which are like, we'll see what happens with this. But overall, it's trippy and it's really cool. So he's making these mechs, and like the really trippy part is he's working on his X Factor, which is like bringing them to life or whatnot, whatever, right? It's still early, right? It's like 3,000 chapters, and this is like within the first 400. So obviously there's still a lot of growth to be had in terms of, you know, fleshing out the system, fleshing out the story. But early on, you know, it's a solid read. It's interesting. Like, there was that chapter which is like super good, and then the rest of it's like solid work and interesting. Like, it's an interesting framework to hang the premise of the web novel on, right? I'm enjoying it. But then he takes this whole premise of this like starving artist type trying to, you know, start his own business with creating mechs, and flips it around into something completely fucking different. Why? Like, now, like, all the magic that was in the beginning of it, and I don't mean like magic in terms of fucking fireballs, but I mean like, as I saw in one of the Reddit comments, the spark that was in that first like 400 fucking chapters, that is what caught your attention, caught your eye, and kept you invested in everything, is fucking gone. It's like he decided he didn't like his original concept, because it's called the War Arc, and if you look it up, which I'm sure nobody will, but if you look it up, like, this is the biggest thing, apparently, about this fucking novel, is that come chapter 4 to 500, it goes off into a war arc, which is like 700 chapters. So, like, more than the original start of the novel, and it, like, completely fucks up the concept that he originally introduced. Like, Vess isn't now making novels. Now he's on a fucking warship in hostile space, and he's leading a team of mech technicians and designers, and it's so completely different. And the problem is, it's not done well. Like, there's already been a couple moments where I'm reading it and I'm like, oh my fucking god. Like, there was a moment like last night when I started getting into this war arc bullshit, and it's like, he's in a ship, and like, you know, he worked hard to make sure that his talents were realized, so that he wasn't on the front lines. Like, he was in one of the operational logistic ships by like the commander of the fleet, you know, literally on the bridge, you know, pulling, you know, live data that the commander was having access. Like, he's in like the most secure location that you could be if you're, you know, in an assaulting force in a, you know, hostile space, right? But it was set up so that you understand that this is where he is, right? He's not on the front line with the mechs themselves, like frontline technician getting shot at, shrapnel, all that shit. Like, he's demonstrated his skill set enough to be, you know, put into a protected quote unquote location, right? So that's a couple chapters of this to really show where he is, and, you know, blah blah blah. And then in the course of like one fucking chapter, maybe two, the author fucking, what's the word I'm looking for? Interjects. Like, it's made completely obvious that all of a sudden, in this situation in which they've, you know, they're trying to assault a planetary location, so all these ships and they are grouped together, and they've tried to get rid of the defenses that are set up, the static defenses, like the missile launchers and the base on the moon, all that stuff. Like, they've done their why are you trying to get over? They've done their due diligence in regards to defanging, declawing, removing the obstacles that would impede them, right? They've disarmed a large percentage of, you know, the possible threats, right? Like you do, right? Logical, makes sense. So the fleet fucking attacks the planet, and then out of fucking nowhere, magical missiles appear, and of too great of an amount for their defenses to be able to handle. Okay, I guess. And then, right, your defensive fleet, the main character fleet, puts up a valiant defense, and really, goes all out to try to defend themselves against this massive triple interpenetrated, but interlocked. You've got 3 waves of missiles, and they're 2 different design types, and they were fired at specific time frames and arcs, so that even though they were fired in 3 separate waves, they'll all hit at the same time. Okay, I feel like this guy's read some Honor Harrington, by the way, because there's some similarities there, but I'll let that pass because Honor Harrington is my favorite series, so fuck it, whatever, bring it up. But I love when people drive out of their lanes and try to hit me. I'm sure it's not on purpose, but whatever. So right, you have the triple wave, the triple ripple, and it's blah blah blah. It's on its way. It's a giant wave. They're not prepared for it, but they give it their all, right? Okay, right. You're like, all right, fine. I can kind of get behind that, whatever. But then it becomes really obvious that the author has decided that Vess, V-E-S, that's the main character, is going to end up on the planet. And how do you know that? It is because even after all of the defenses and the logical progression they made through the system before finally beginning their planetary assault, you have 3 magical waves of missiles that appeared out of nowhere for the most part. And even with all of the valiant defenses of the defenders, which would have been enough, right? If you have all of that, you have the mechs firing and the ships are firing their anti-air defense lasers and projectiles and ballistic weapons and kinetic weapons, and mechs are out there sacrificing themselves so that the logistic ships aren't impacted by the devastating wave of firepower that's currently right. You have that fucking majestic moment. But literally, what fucking happens is, all of that happens. I think there's 120,000 missiles, which they manage with all of their defenses to get down to 100, which is obscene, but okay. What kind of car is that? Right? So, you have this moment, and it's tense, and it's okay. They've thrown up all their waves. What kind of car is that? It's fucking very wide, which tells me it's expensive. Can't see. I think it's an Audi. I think it's the Audi. Because that's the car that surprised me with how fucking wide it was when I first saw it in person. Yep, it's an Audi. Can barely make out the 4 rings. Anyway. Right, so you have the moment, the missiles, the defenders of fucking blood, sweat, and tears, and thrown themselves valiantly in front of the missiles, to make their last stand to protect the core of the fleet. The logistic ships are being shepherded by these massive behemoths clad in thick armor. They are huddled together at the center of all of their brethren, so that they can take advantage of each and every bit of protection that can be possibly offered to them, because the logistic ships are the heart and the core of the fleet, and therefore have earned the greatest levels of protection. So the defenders do not hesitate to sacrifice themselves to allow the heart to survive. Right? This is the moment that we're at. And what happens is that while that particular scene could be written out so that, you have the last couple missiles slip through the defenses, which impacts here, there, or whatever, maybe there's, right? The problem is, he literally writes in that somehow, at the last moment, these missiles magically get updated programming, and each of them therefore targets the logistic ships upon which your hero has been located. Now, this has never been done in this series previously. Like, this is chapter 500 and something. To be fair, there have been other scenes of violence and war, but in regards to violence and battle, but in regards to full-on war, it has been limited. There have been instances of, fleets or mech on mech action, violence in battles and whatnot, and that he's deliberately mentioned the whole limits of light speed and FTL requirements and quantum entanglements being required to breach the limitations of faster than light communications. Like, all of this has been written down, so that he's written some rule sets behind how the technologies of his universe work. The fact that, out of nowhere, for the very first time, and in a way that is deliberately done so that your main character is going to be on a ship that explodes and therefore ends up on the planet, is such a ham-fisted and horrible fucking writing sin. Like, and what's funny, so that magical update that came out of nowhere and has breached each and every fucking rule set that he's enabled, like, to be able to target those specific missiles from wherever they were launched, you would have to utilize FTL technology. And you would, like, even the Honor Harrington series can barely pull that off towards the end of the series. And it's a much more, I don't want to say realistic, but realized system. Like, you're talking high-end tech, right? You're dealing with galactic distances here. Like, so, I mean, light seconds, light minutes. Like, it's a pretty big deal. So, but what makes it worse is that last bit of targeting information, which enables these missiles to magically miss each and every one of the defenders, and therefore target very specifically into the logistic ships, which makes no fucking sense, is never remarked upon. Like, you never get the perspective from the people who are launching the missiles, who are like, oh, we've got, we can see where the defending, core of the fleet is. Let's make sure we target it. Okay, well, we have this last burst. It's really fucking hard, and most of our systems are down. But I think if I fucking twist the yellow knob into the subparticle quantum stream, I may be able at the very last minute to enable these missiles to gain an extra 3% targeting justification. Like, that sort of hand-wavy and bullshit, which would add some credence to this. It's never remarked upon. Ever. It's literally fucking missiles, valiant defense of the core of the fleet, and fucking missiles that are magically updated out of fucking nowhere, by whom, never mentioned, purely, 100% purely, so that the ship of the main character is hit, and he therefore is forced to crash down on the planet. It is such terrible fucking writing. Like, if you're gonna design the scenario, design it in a way that makes fucking sense. Like, that's the instance where, like, if you're being attacked by 120,000 missiles, and your defensive systems are designed to put up, a defensive envelope that can, fend that off, fine, write it the fuck out. Don't have all these fucking glory scenes where you have all these defenders do each and everything that they can do to stem the tide of death, which is on the way to kill them, and then have 120,000 missiles pared down to like 100, and then magically have that last 100 have their targeting upgrade. Like, keep it, alright? So they did everything they could, and still 25,000 missiles still managed to get through, which was more than enough to overwhelm the beleaguered fleet's defenses, causing critical damage to critical systems, at times when they couldn't spare them. Like, all of this makes sense, right? It sounds better. It feels better. You're invested in it. You're invested in the defense. You're invested in the defenders, giving it all. Their all. You're invested in the attacking force. Who's actually the defenders in this case? We'll talk about that. The attacking force, the force that has launched these missiles. You're invested in, the amount of firepower that they have. Like, it fucking flows. It makes sense. You're invested in the moment. You're invested in the scene. Your believability, the thing, the sense of suspension of belief, suspension of disbelief, fully engaged. Like, you're in the moment. You're riding out. You're at the ship. You're at the console. You're feeling it buck around you as it's, immersed in the hellish flames and fires of war, death, destruction, and hell itself. Like, you're there. You're riding it out. Fingers clenched on the console, desperately hoping to survive the next few precious. Like, you're there, right? All of that is completely invalidated when you, as the author, decide it means nothing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this moment where I've given you this hope because we've somehow managed to pare down 120,000 missiles to 100. Right? You read that, and you're like, yeah, we have a chance to survive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say no, because the missiles are still so powerful that even 100 can magically take out all of these ships. Wow. And even though your hero is ensconced within the center of the command ship where the commanding officer is, which means in the universe and rule set that you've presented, the most defended location. Because you're not going to let your commander fucking hang his ass out to be shot the fuck off when he's in charge of the whole fucking fleet, right? You protect him. So you're literally sitting 5 feet behind the commander of the fleet, which means you are in the most well-defended location in the entire fucking fleet, which you have established with the preceding chapters leading up to demonstrate how your main character has earned his position there. And yet somehow, with all of the scenes that you've written out, with valiant defense, you invalidate all of that just because you've decided he wants to hit the planet. So you make your missiles curve at the last moment. So that what they do is what we've done is we've taken these so I've updated it. I've updated the missiles. All the missiles have been updated now. And they know exactly where he is. So I'm going to shoot him directly down because I have the magic touch. And you don't have to ask who I am because it doesn't make a difference because it's just the magic missiles are just going to be magically updated because that's how I want it to happen. What? Like, that's fucked up. That's an example of terrible writing. So on top of all of that, you can sort of excuse those moments, right? Like the one last night. Like, I literally legit stopped. I fucking know. That was bad. That was fucking terrible. That was such a terrible moment that you're just wrenched out of this whole fucking story. Because it's just like the author's hand-fisted attempt to make certain that what he wants, terrible, fucking terrible. But even outside of that, because like I said early on, it was literally one of the best moments in any web novel I've ever seen, because he's making mechs, and his company is called the Living Mech LMC, Living Mech Company, because he's working on his X Factor, and his X Factor is basically, he believes that the mechs are alive, right? So not just giant machines, but some sort of life in there. That's what the X Factor was determined to be like, when they were in the study, and about how pilots would interface with their mechs, and it felt like it was more than just a big solid machine. It felt like it was alive, right? So that's what he's chasing, which is cool. I like that. It's cool. It reminds me of one of the episodes of Love, Death, and Robots, which I think I want to say is like Lucky 13, which in and of itself made me want to write a book based on a concept somewhere like that. And I do have an idea to do it, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, like, I like that. I like how it's presented, right? And one of those early chapters, he was really working on it, and I think he got to a new level of it, and you could sort of see its impact on the pilot who was piloting a virtual mech. So it wasn't even real life. It was like he's designing it for the game, which is fine. It's fine. But like you can see its impact on the pilot of the mech and how she was adapting to the traits of the mech that he had instilled. Like, it was such a good fucking scene. It was such a really well written, impactful scene. So you can make some excuses, give some leeway to a degree. When you have that also, right? You have your ups and downs, your pros and cons. If you have the highest high, all right, well, sometimes you may have the lowest low. I get that, right? But the problem is, all that magic that he built up into the first 400 chapters is completely fucking gone in the next 700 because he's decided he wants to write a space opera now and have his main character, who designs fucking mechs, and is not the superhero that most of these stories are based on, where the guy can do whatever. He's a fucking nerd. He's a nerd who sits in his goddamn chair and designs mechs. I'm fine with that. It was presented very well. I'm 100% behind that. But now he's magically throwing this fucker into situations where he's supposed to be James goddamn Bond, and it's not. You're perverting what you originally started writing. And the spark and the magic that was in those first 400 chapters does not exist when you fucking decide, I'm just going to write something completely different that invalidates all. So that's where I am. So if you look it up, everybody's like, yeah, the war arc sucks, and it's like 700 fucking chapters. Now, but after that, it goes back to when, I don't know, he designed fucking mechs. So I'm skimming it. That's where I am. I'm skimming it. I'm skimming it to get through it. So, yeah, I'm going to get tacos because I left early and I want tacos. So, goodbye.